Welcome to Living Rock Sermons, a place where we bring the transformative power of the Sunday message to your ears. Each week, we bring you a sermon from our most recent service filled with insights, inspiration, and guidance to help us navigate life's challenges and deepen our connection with God. Whether you're joining us from the comfort of your home, on your daily commute, or during a quiet moment of reflection, we are honored to have you as a part of our digital community. Together, we'll embark on a meaningful exploration of faith guided by the wisdom shared from the pulpit. This podcast serves as a bridge, uniting us in a shared experience of worship, reflection, and growth. So get ready to open your hearts and minds as we dive into this week's sermon.
Real quick, Pastor is clearly not here today. He wanted me to send his love. He is up in Worcester, Mass. this morning, doing a new pastor installation up at the church up there. So he sends his love, but he's off doing the Lord's work elsewhere. I titled my message, Wrestling with God's Calling. And I would be lying if I said I didn't wrestle with this message quite a bit. Just trying to find a direction, trying to find what I wanted to say, something that I felt was edifying and something that spoke to me and not just words on a page. And we'll get to why that is later. I'm going to be wrestling with just using a mic I'm not accustomed to. I don't have my earpiece. So if I start to drift, let me know if I start can't hear me. There's a few different levels to calling, right? We have our general and universal calling, right? And what is that? To be followers of Christ, correct? It's laid out pretty plain and simple in Ephesians 4. We're going to look at 1 through 6 here. As a prisoner for the Lord, then I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There's one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. So, in our general calling as Christians, we're called to be little Christs, right? And we're trying to live a Christ-like life. And that means Christ has to not invade, it's the wrong word, but penetrate every facet of our life and all our dealings and everything we do, right? We have to act it out in our daily lives. It's great to show up here and throw our hands up and be a certain way around a certain people, but when we go out into the world, it gets a little difficult, right? And myself, I work in the service industry. It's not easy dealing with people. I'm going to be honest. If you've heard me before, you know I'm going to be blunt and honest. So if you haven't, buckle up. It's hard to deal with people, but for me, acting out, having Jesus played out in my life and in my actions is being patient with difficult customers. It's being patient with people that you're working with that you just don't seem to get it. It's bearing that up and not just casting them aside. It's being, we'll say outside of my business, it's being a reputable businessman, somebody who conducts their business with honor and integrity, right? It's being a doctor who practices with honor and integrity. It's letting Jesus guide your steps in everything you do, not just here at church, but in your personal vocation as well, and just not even at work, but in life, all right? When somebody cuts you off on the highway or blocks, or you get stuck in gridlock, are you telling them they're number one and using some choice words, or are you showing grace? Are you like, Okay, I'm not going to lean on my horn. I'm not going to jump out. I'm not going to road rage. It's as simple as that. Sometimes. I'm going to keep going. Ephesians 4:11 through 16. So Christ gave himself to the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and teachers to equip his people for works of service so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. Then we will no longer be infants tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of him who is the head. That is Christ. From him, the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. So, we all have different roles so that the whole church can do the work of the ministry. Right? Right here we're reading that there's unity. Unity is required. Right? We need to build that in the body. We can't build unity with some of us leaving here saying, I go to Living Rock Church, or I'm a Christian, and then you're not acting in a way that would represent Christ in any way, shape, or form. We need to do that together. Are we living a life worthy of this calling? I'd wager to say hardly at times. But he knows that, right? He knows we're flawed. We're inherently flawed. But see, we need to, as we grow and mature in this calling, we increasingly live, love, and serve like Jesus, and we become more grounded in him, right? And that way, again, we're in election season. How many commercials, how many campaign commercials have you seen? I'd wager over what, 1,000 a day, right? And everyone is trying to toss you over here or scare you over to this side or scare you to do. See, when we ground ourselves in Jesus, like the writer of Ephesians says, we're not going to get tossed back and forth by the waves or this rhetoric or these scare tactics, right? But we have to do all of this in community. Can you really be humble alone? You can't really humble yourself to nothing, right? Can you be patient alone? Well, not with anyone not testing your patience. Can you bear with others without the others? It's impossible to achieve unity alone. And we need to be unified in Christ to achieve the work of the church. So we all have the second layer here. We all have an individual calling, right? What's our role? We all have a role in the kingdom. And, you know, we're all very familiar with the passages in 1 Corinthians 12 that outline the parts of the body, right? And it illustrates how many functions make up a unified body. And our human nature is kind of to compare ourselves to one another, and that doesn't do us any good. Like the writer said, you know, I can't tell the foot, you know, I don't need you. We need all of it. A body's not a body without all the parts. And just because, you know, we can look up here and we can see our fantastic pastor, and that's his calling, that's his job, that's his vocation in the kingdom, but that doesn't make him any less integral than, you know, our brother Paul here who's playing the keyboard and leading worship. It doesn't make him any less integral than the singers that bring us into worship. It doesn't make him any less integral or more integral than Nico coming up here and praying over people, right? We can't compare each other in our calling. We just need to know, we need to find our way into it and unify with the rest of us to move forward in these callings. See, if we start to question it, God knows how to use us best, right? We don't just necessarily choose our calling. Our calling finds us, and it's only through him. So what are you called to? There's going to be inclinations towards what you're called to, and it's usually going to end up being something you're passionate about. Paul, you love music, you love worship, correct? Angie, I know wherever you went, you've waxed poetic up here about what it means to you to worship. There's a call to that. There was a draw to that. There's a passion. You can see this play out in the life of Nehemiah. He grieved the broken walls and gates of the city of Jerusalem. What grieves, excites, or interests you? Explore it. That's where you're going to find your calling. See, our passions are undeniable, and we wear them on our countenance. Nehemiah was the cupbearer to the king, and he had access to the king, and the king saw his face. He said, what's with the face? Right? That's literally how it started. What's going on? So, if we are wearing our passions on our countenance, it's going to be found out. It's going to be seen, and it seems crazy, but being the cupbearer gave Nehemiah access to the king to see through what his passion was for, what his lament was for. It gave him access. It made a way. It paved a way. So God's going to put you in a position to find that specific individual calling. Now, the meat and potatoes of what I want to talk about today mostly comes from resisting our calling. That's a very real thing too. We can miss our calling. We can enter into it immediately, but we could also resist it. And this is played out epically in Exodus 3 when Moses is receiving instructions to go to the Pharaoh and liberate Israel. It's in Exodus 3:11, but Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" What's Moses at? What's the underlying theme of Moses' words here? Does he really think he knows himself better than God knows him? Like, who am I? Well, you got the wrong guy. It can't be me. It's not, no. Does he really think God picked the wrong guy? And God's answer is incredible. In 3:12, and God said, "I will be with you." Does that answer literally anything about who Moses is in general? It does it? It's not Moses, you're a shepherd. Moses, you're this. Moses, you're that. No. His answer is, "I'm with you." He's telling Moses, your identity is the one I am with. Case closed. That's all you need. Who you are outside of that doesn't matter, Moses. I've told you, this is the identity I've put on you. Your identity is tied to my presence in your life, not what you've done up until this point. See, we're not called based on who we are, but who he is. But Moses continues to protest. Moses said to God in 3:13, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" Seems kind of like a flimsy retort to me, given the fact he's standing in front of a burning bush that hasn't burnt up and hearing this booming voice of God. I assume it's booming. I can only imagine. And his answer is, "I am who I am." See, I am who I am. This is not how others refer to him with descriptors as God the Father, God the Comforter. This is how he refers to himself. This is God telling Moses, "This is my name. I know you guys have a lot of things you call me, but this is my name." That's how you know. In 4:1, Moses answers, "What if they don't believe me or listen to me and say that the Lord did not appear to you. Again, this is Moses calling attention to himself and who he is and how believable he is. So, outside of just saying it and people taking him at his word, God shows him some signs. He says, throw your staff down. Turns into a snake. Pick it up. It's good. Stick your hand in your cloak. Pulls it out. It's leprous. Put it back in. We're good to go. Do you believe me? Do you believe I am who I am? See, you're gonna perform these signs to them, and they're gonna understand. They're gonna get it. But still, Moses, thinking he's got the wrong guy. In 4:10 through 12, Moses said to the Lord, pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. The Lord said to him, who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak and teach you what to say. So God's saying, you still don't get it. I made you. You don't think I got you covered? Yeah, you see yourself as this guy who can't talk. I mean, I've been upfront about this up here before. I don't like public speaking. Every time I get called to do this, I'm, okay, all right, well, time to get on it. But that's my perception of myself. And every single time, God's, no, here you go. I made you. I've got you covered. I know you think you can't talk. You don't believe in your ability to talk, but I'm telling you, you're good. Can you just believe that? Can you just believe I'm telling you, I've got you. I made your mouth. I can tell you whether I can shut it right now, or I can make it work epically. But still, Moses in 4:13 says, pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else. See, there's a turning point here where it seems like Moses is going from making excuses about his ineptitude or his inability or his why it shouldn't be him to almost to a level of honesty of I either really don't want to or I'm terrified. See, we're not all going to like skip ahead into our calling and everything's going to be grand and we love it and we're like, yes, I can't wait to go do my calling. Sometimes it's going to be fearful. It's going to cause anxiety in your heart. Like I said, I get anxious every single time. Every time I see it pop up on like our agenda, it's pastor away, this, JD Phil, I'm okay. All right, let's get to work. See, Moses was kind of making excuses as to why it shouldn't be him that really had no bearing, but ultimately it got peeled down to I might just not want to. That's where I'm at. So in 4:14 through 17, the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, what about your brother, Aaron the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and he will be glad to see you. You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth. I will help both of you speak and will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth and as if you were God to him. But take this staff in your hand so you can perform the signs with it. At this point, guys, no more excuses. This is what's happening. You've made your final excuse. I don't want it to be me. I can't talk good, all this. All right, here, X, Y, Z. These are the things that you're going to do, that I'm going to put in place. Now you have no excuse. So go along. You're not going to win this argument. If you are truly called to do something, even if you're scared, even if you're fearful, even if you don't think it's you, if you are actually called to do something, you better believe God's going to make a way for you to do it. It might be uncomfortable, but he's going to make that way. See, Moses isn't the only one who resisted or at least questioned his call. Gideon in Judges 6, he was instructed to save Israel from the Midianites. And he's like, how am I supposed to do that? I am the weakest clan. It's a fair point. We're not fighters. But in 6:16, what's the Lord's answer? The Lord answered, I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive. Jeremiah 1:7-8 said, Jeremiah's protest, I'm too young. I can't do this, I'm too young. But the Lord said to me, do not say I'm too young. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you and will rescue you, declares the Lord. Are we seeing a pattern here? Circumstantially, who they are in relation to down here on the world has no bearing on what they're called to do, because the Lord is with them. So now we're going to get into my personal anecdote. Honestly, right up until Monday, and I was open with Pastor with this, so I told him I'm going to share this and whatnot. I was honestly feeling like I just was not going to be able to do this today. I had some stuff down. I wasn't really thrilled with it. I didn't think it was all that good. It felt like words on a page. There wasn't life in it for me. And a lot of this had to do with just things going on, like a lot of additional stress, a lot of extra work. And, I've taken on some new responsibilities. We're working on getting business off the ground. I've been pulled in every direction, and every direction feels like it's pulling me down, right? And even last Sunday, I was sitting up front, and I'm just lamenting having to have the conversation with Pastor and laying out all these things. And I told him, when I first was asked to speak, 4 years ago or whatnot, one of my friend's moms told me, she's like, remember in James 3, they say, you got to be careful, because those who teach are judged more strictly. And up until this particular one, I read that as a challenge to be better than who I am, as a challenge to really, really focus, and as a challenge to exceed what I thought I should be able to do up here, right? But this time it felt more like one of those terrifying warning lights on your dashboard, based on how I felt about what I had down. And it was terrifying, and it was scary, and I was stress levels through the roof, cortisol surging through me, right? And then I was like, I was Monday morning, I was like, I didn't want to interrupt, I didn't want to sully the celebration of Peggy on Sunday, so I said, okay, I'll talk to Pastor on Monday. And I had to work all day. It was a horrific day at the brewery. Everything was going absolutely as wrong as it could, right? And I'm standing there, and if you don't know anything about the process, it's a lot of moving fluid from one place to another, right? And you have to do that through pumps. And I have this one pump is the heart and soul of my operation. And I look down, and it's just pouring out, liquid pouring out. I'm like, oh, my pump's broken. I'm dead in the water right now. And I was supposed to produce 2 more batches on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. And the Lord said, well, now you got time to write. I'm like, yep, you're right. But I was looking at that exploded pump as just another thing on the pile of crap that was weighing me down, that was going to keep me from doing it. And I called my mom on the way home, still fully intending on calling Pastor on Monday evening. And she was like, oh, well, Pastor told me you're preaching this Sunday. I'm like, well, now I'm locked in. I'm like, well, and I was like, well, Ma, and then I stopped and then just my lips got sealed. I was going to tell her. I was going to tell you, Mom. I promise. But something shut my mouth. And I'm like, nope, you know what? Just like that verse, the challenge was thrown. You got 2 days to sort this out. And I hadn't consequently, hadn't dove into Moses yet. And as I'm reading, as I'm going through it, as I'm trying to put my thoughts down, I get to, before I get there, I was even like, there's got to be somebody else who's got something in the tank. I knew there was somebody else who had something in the tank, prepared, that didn't get to share recently. And I get to the send somebody else, and I didn't have a mirror, but I can only imagine what my face looked like. Because I was reading it, and I'm reading them. I'm like, look at this guy. He's just resisting. And I'm like, and I'm looking at the page, and I just, in the back of my head, I hear, see what I did there? See what I did there? I'm like, so now do I think God came down and broke my pump? Probably not. It was probably on its, it's probably seals break and whatever. But the timing is pretty curious. But without that, and without kind of having these things line up and force me into sitting down and really pouring over this argument, I wouldn't have received anything. And I certainly wouldn't have received anything that hopefully I've been able to bring to you. And to look at the other examples of these men who were like, I can't, this isn't me, this isn't for me. What? But the answer being, I am with you. And that's all that matters. And we're living in a world right now that just is, everything's about finding your identity or what I identify as, right? But the most important one is the one that he places on you as someone he's with. God said, I'm with you. And it's not just me. It's not just these guys back then. It's not just pastors. Everyone here. He is with you. And that's the most important thing we can identify with, is someone who God is with. And until we know that, we're never going to be able to step into our calling. Whether it's a calling, a lifelong calling, a calling for a time, or a calling for, 30 minutes on a Sunday morning. I am with you. And if we leave with nothing else, if everything else just kind of breezed over, if any of my words don't stick with you, that's fine. I'm okay with that. Cool. I am with you. Simple statement. Please leave with that in your pocket. Because it's the only thing that's going to hold you up when you just don't want to get up and when you don't want to do the thing, whatever that thing is, even if it's get up and parent, or get up and do your job, or get up and lead worship, or get up and bring a message, or get up and pray for somebody. You're never going to get up and do any of it unless you know I am with you. That's all I can say. That's all I can say. Oh.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Living Rock Sermons. We hope that today's sermon has left a lasting impact on your heart and spirit. If you'd like to connect with Living Rock more, we invite you to visit our website, living-rock.org. There you can find information about our upcoming services, current events, and all of our ministries. Whether you're based in Killingworth, Connecticut, near the shoreline, or anywhere around the world, we welcome you to join our vibrant community. Stay connected with us on social media to receive daily inspiration, updates, and engaging content. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and you can find us on YouTube as well. We're here to support you on your faith journey, so please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or prayer requests. Thank you again for tuning in. As we continue to grow together in faith, may God's love and grace fill your life abundantly. Until next time, take care and may you find strength and peace in His presence.